All right, guys, are there any questions on any of the assignment or assignment? Any questions on last night's assignment? Any questions on last night's assignment? All right, guys. Questions on last night's assignment? All right, guys, so we're going to go on. Yes, ma'am. It is on page, I believe, 107, 3 or 4 through 10, all. As you can double check in Google Classroom under 3.11, it will have the assignment listed. Yes. All right, guys. What we're looking at today is we're looking at more factoring. We're looking at more factoring. Now, most likely, guys, we will look at, like, say, maybe one of the first few and then move on to the next type, the new type. There's only one new setup that we're really going to be looking at today.
Is this a...
Yes. Now, we can look at this one here first. 8x squared minus 56x plus 48. And whenever we factor, the first thing we need to look for is a greatest common factor. The first thing we're going to look for is a greatest common factor, and 8 is a greatest common factor among these three terms. So we can factor it out. And when we factor out the 8, we're essentially dividing each of the terms by 8. So 8x squared divided by 8 would just be x squared. The negative 56 divided by 8 would be negative 7x. And 48 divided by 8 is going to be plus. And again, the main thing is we're going to do is factor out the greatest common factor first. Now that we have the greatest common factor factored out, we can move on to step number 2. Which is our 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. And after this, what did we do next? We found the sign that goes into both, and we look at the third term, because if the third term is positive, the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. Well, here the third term is positive, so the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term, which is negative. So both of the signs would be negative. And that takes us through steps 1 through 3. Step number 4 is to find the factors of the first and third term. So what are the factors of x squared? And x. X times x is the only factors of x squared, so we can go on and just put that in, x and x. Now the factors of 6 are 1 times 6 and 2 times 3. Which set of the factors of 6 do we want to try first? Okay. Because we could do 1 and 6 or 2 and 3. I heard a few more 1 and 6, so we'll try it first. And when we check it, we're really just using the distributive property to multiply out. Now we're not going to multiply everything because we already saw yesterday that x times x will get us back to x squared. Because x and x are the factors of x squared, so it should get me right back to where I started. 1 times 6, well, that's going to get me right back to 6 because that's the factors of 6. So the main ones we need to focus on are the middle. So x times negative 6 would be negative 6x. Negative 1 times x would be negative x. And negative 6x minus x is negative 7x. And since that is the correct middle term, the same one, this is factored. Now, one thing, again, we do need to pay attention to is the fact that the 8, since it is a part of it, it needs to be a part of the answer. That does need to be a part of the answer. So especially on the test, the homework is not going to be too big of a deal. There might be a few points, maybe a third. If you have enough of them, I might take out. But especially on the test, that'll be worth a point. Each one of these are going to be worth a point, and the signs are going to be worth a point. So, or the signs are 1 point, and the numbers. So it could be one, 2, 3, 4, or 5 points for this one problem. So, any other questions on this here? Do we feel comfortable with factoring these here? Yes? Okay. Let's see here. Do we need to see how this one's factored? Yes? Okay. Let's look at this one here. Is there a greatest common factor, because that's going to be our first main step, between these 3 terms? No. So we move on to step 2, which is our 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. So there wasn't a greatest common factor, so we moved on to step 2, which is our 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. We have that done. Then the next thing is to find the sign. Right? Since the 5 is positive, the signs are the same, and they match the sign of the middle term, which is negative. So both signs are negative. Both signs are negative. Because if the constant term or the third term is positive, the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term, which here would be minus and minus. And our next step is to find the factors of the first and third term. So we're looking for the factors of 2x squared. Because we know for certain we're going to have x and x, because those are the only factors of x squared. And well, the only factors of 2 are 2 and 1. So we can just throw it in, because if there's only one set of factors, we're just going to throw it in. Now the factors of 5 are 1 and 5. It's prime. There's only one set, so we can say 1 and 5. Yeah. Now it doesn't really matter how we plug them in, because again, our last step is plug and check. And again, we're only really going to do the last and middle, first and last in the middle, because 2x times x will get me back to 2x squared. Negative 1 times negative 5 is still 5. That doesn't change. But here, 2x times negative 5 would be negative 10x. Negative 1 times x is negative x. And negative 10x minus x is negative 11x. Is that what we wanted? Well, no, we want it to be negative 7. Okay. So we do need to change something. Do we want to change the 2x and x or the 1 and 5? What do you say, Austin? 2x and x or 1 and 5? 1 and 5. Because at this point here, it really doesn't make a big difference what we change. We just need to change one of them. Now, when we do this here, we check it again. 2x times negative 1 would be negative 2x. Negative 5 times x would be negative 5x. And negative 2x minus 5x would be negative 7x. Is that what we wanted? So that's our answer. And really, so far, this is exactly what we did yesterday. Yes, this isn't any real different than yesterday. Because we're only really going to cover one thing that's different. Any questions on this here before we move on? Do we feel comfortable with what we did yesterday? Kinda? We can do another one. Let's look at this one. Okay, so what would we do first? Well, there's one step we need to do first. We need to look for a greatest common factor, and probably we can already say, is there one? No. Okay, so we move past that. Second step would be our two sets of parentheses with three spaces. Now the three spaces is really just to give you all space so that you know where to fill in so it's not too close together. But as Trey was saying, yes, what you're saying with opposite signs is true, because step number 3 is to find the signs. If the third term is positive, then the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term. Well, is the third term positive? No, it's negative. If the third term is negative, then the signs are opposite. So one's going to be positive and one's going to be negative. And it was asked this morning, does positive have to go first or negative? Well, no. I just have the habit of putting the positive sign first, the negative sign second. The order doesn't matter because, again, once we get to the end, step number 5, we're going to check it to see if it is right. And as we saw yesterday, well, if we have the right setup, but it gives us the wrong sign for the middle number, so it turns out that it tells us that it's positive 19x and not negative 19, all we've got to do is what? Flip the signs. We flip them and we've got it. Now, that takes us to step number 4, the factors of the first and third term. Well, 4x squared, because we have 2 times 2, or 1 times for our factors of 4. Which one do we want to use first? 2 times 2. What are the factors of 5? And last but not least, we're going to check it. Multiply 2x times negative 5 is negative 10x. 1 times 2x is plus. Is that what we wanted? No. Can I switch the, so what can we do next? We can, what are we switching? 1 and 5. Would switching the 2x and 2x change anything? No. So we can say 5 and 1. Well, 2x times negative 1 is negative 2x. 5 times 2x is plus 10x. And that gives me a positive 8x. Well, that was almost like we just switched the signs, isn't it? Well, it works out that way because we have 2x and 2x. So really, we just changed the sign in front of 1 and 5. It really didn't change anything else. But this only happens when the first term, the term with x, is the same on both. So as it's 2x and 2x, it really doesn't change anything because we still have 2x times 1 and 5 times 2x. We still have that same multiplication. But it's still, is it wrong to put it this way and check it? No. I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing it. We're just making sure. So, since both setups with 2x, because we only had those two, that means the 2x and 2x isn't going to be the right choice, so we can go with, say, 1 and 4. Guys, let's focus in. And if we check this here, x times negative 1 is negative x. 5 times 4x is going to be plus 20x. This would give us 19x. Is that what we wanted?
Yeah.
Almost. Yeah, we just need to flip the signs, make the 1 positive. And make the 5 negative. Which would mean this is the correct setup. And that's it. Because you can write 1x, there's nothing wrong with that. Because if you want to write 1x, that's perfectly fine, because it is the same as just saying x. Either one of those would work. Questions on this here? We ready for what's new? Let's look at this one here. So in your note sheets, it should say example 4 at the top. Yep, almost. Yep, right there. So what makes this one different than what we've been doing today and yesterday? First term's negative, yes? Well, it'd be nice if it wasn't negative, right? So how can I make it positive? Right? Or we can do what? We can factor it out. We can factor it out. Because even if there was a greatest common factor of 2, we can pull out negative 2. Here, since the only greatest common factor that we want to pull out is negative 1, well, negative 4x squared is going to be positive because we pulled the negative out. The negative 8x is going to become plus, and the positive 5 is now negative 5. Now, if there had been a greatest common factor of 2 as well, we could have just pulled out negative 2 from each and every single term. But from here, everything else stays the same. We just factored the negative out. Now we follow the same exact patterns. And we do this mainly because when we start trying to find the factors of the first term for negative 4, if we had left it as negative 4, we would have to have 1 times negative 4, or negative 4 times 1, or 2 times negative 2, or negative 2 times 2. We have to take that into account. But if I pull that negative out, the 4x is just 4, we're fine. The 5 is negative, but step number 3, find the signs, takes care of that. So we're down to step 3. So if the third term is positive, the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. So here, since the 5 is negative, we're going to have positive and negative opposite signs.
So it'll be either 1 times 4 or 2 times 2.
So our factors of 4 are 1 and 4, or 2 and 2. Now we can go on and put the x in x, 1 and 5, because 1 and 5 are the only factors of 5. X and x are the only factors of x squared. So our real choice to make is, are we going to use 1 and 4 first, or 2 and 2? 2 and 2, and most likely, yes, we would need to switch the signs. Because 2x times negative 5 is going to be negative 10x. 1 times 2x is going to be plus 2x, and this gives us negative 8x. So we did get the right number, but we have the wrong sign. So I need to change the negative to be positive, and I need to change the positive to be negative. So did having a negative a term and negative term in front of the x squared really change the process? Not really, no. We just had to factor out the negative, and then everything else fell back in line. Any questions on this here? Are you ready for the next one? Because I believe there are, what, 3 left? 2, 3.
For the day?
So there's 3 problems left in the note sheets. Pick one that you think is the hardest one, and we'll do it.
Let's just do that one.
The last one? This one here?
Yeah, that one's, they're all the same.
Yep. Because this one, or the M one? Yeah. Let's do this one. That's perfectly fine. Let's do this one here.
We'll just take out -1.
So we'll take out the negative, yes. So if we take out the negative -5m squared becomes 5m squared. The positive 6n plus 1. So we're dividing everything by -1.
Sorry,
Yeah.
that's the one part that like I can't stand.
So we don't have to do it every time, but because the 5m is negative, it's going to make it a little bit easier to work with if we factor it out. So we'll finish this, we'll do it, and then I'll do it again without factoring out the negative, and we'll see how it changes it. Now, our next step, guys, is going to be our 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Guys, so we look at the third term, and here it's positive, so the signs are the same, and they match the side of the middle term.
We have to factor it out if we. Oh, we're looking at the same.
Which is negative, so they're both going to be negative. And lastly, we need to look at the factors of the first, guys. So we can have 5m and m, because m squared, the only factors of m squared is m and m. M and m. The only factors of 5 are 5 and 1, so we'll have 5 and just m. Now the factors of 1 are 1 and 1. Now the last thing we need to do is check it. 5m times -1 is negative. -1 times m is, which gives us negative, which is exactly what we wanted. So this here is the correct answer. That's all we have to do for this here.
I'm so happy.
Now, guys, I'm going to do this one more time. Guys, we're going to do this. I'm going to work this one through one more time, but this time I'm not going to factor out the greatest common factor of -1. So we would start the same way and have our 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Now, because the 1 is negative, our signs would be opposite. 1 would be positive and 1 would be negative. Now, the factors of 1 are 1 and 1. The factors of m are m and m. But our first term is -5. So we have to look at the factors of -5. Well, the factors of -5 is going to be 1 times -5 and -1 times 5. So we can do -1 and 5 and then check it. Well, -1 times -1 would give us m. 1 times 5m would be plus 5m, which is 6m. Is that what we wanted? Well, yes, so this here is the correct answer. And it is almost the exact same as what we had. Now, the one we had was m minus 1 times 5m minus 1 and the negative out front, yes? Now, if we take this first set of parentheses here and I factor a -1 out, well, the -1 divided by -1m would make it a positive m. This here would be -1 times 5m minus 1. So they are the same thing, it's just that -1 got multiplied through into the first parenthesis. So it gives us the same thing, but yeah, because when we factored it out, the -5, we only had 5. We only had 1 set of factors. We don't have this 2 set to work with. So I think it's a little bit easier to factor the -1 out and then factor it than to leave it in. But it's not wrong to leave it in either. And that's it. And this is your homework for